Hi, everyone. Welcome to Here We Are, Brattleboro's community talk show. I'm Wendy O'Connell, and we are back again with another guest from our community to talk about what's going on. We have Jim Maxwell today. Jim is a lawyer, an actor, and he's also producer on WVEW, our local community radio station, which is celebrating its 15th anniversary this year. Jim has lived in the Brattleboro area for almost 30 years, and he's going to talk with us today about how following our curiosity can prove to be rewarding, creative, and sometimes surprising. Welcome, Jim.
Thank you. I'm pleased to be here.
Oh, I'm so glad you're here. Yes, I've been wanting to have you on the show, and it's a nice coincidence that the WVEW is having their fundraising this year, and also their anniversary of 15 years as being WVEW, which we're going to talk about in a couple of minutes. You were raised in northern New Jersey.
Yes, of all places. Yes, indeed. And got out of there as fast as I could.
Did you?
Well, I went to college at age 17, which constitutes running away from home, I think.
Yes, it does. And at that time, was it still pretty rural?
Well, I grew up in the Ridgewood, Ramsey, Saddle River area, which is in Bergen County. It was suburban then, and it's even more suburban now, much more densely populated and much more posh than it was, when I was growing up and going to, school in that area.
Yeah, it's amazing how much it's changed. I know almost a different state now.
Yeah, but the same narrow highways. So,
yes,
50% or 100% more vehicles and no more room.
When you were growing up, Jim, I know that that at some point you got interested in acting. And were there things in your life that led up to that interest?
The acting actually came later. I didn't really start acting until I was at, after I'd run away from home, I was at Michigan State. I was in radio and television. I think my first real curiosity, to use that word, and interest was radio. And frankly, it's still the most fun job I ever had. Go into that a little later. But so I was at radio and television program at Michigan State, and kind of slid over into theater and acting, which really took my heart and my passion. Yeah. And I really continued with acting and theater and didn't really get back into radio and doing radio shows until first Radio Free Brattleboro and now WVEW. Theater and acting is my passion.
Yeah.
When I say radio, it's the most fun. It's not as hard work as acting. But I listened to New York radio stations from a very young age. Yeah. And those DJs and that, rock and roll and all that was really, alluring. And it seemed like it would be a lot of fun to do. And in fact, when I got to Michigan State, by age 18 and a half, I was a disc jockey at a country western station in Lansing, Michigan. WITL, we had a studio on the top of the Michigan National Bank Tower. It's the tallest building in central Michigan at that time. And we had a studio up there, and I had the 6 p.m. to midnight FM shift. No commercials. All I had were public service announcements because it was a pretty barren time period, time slot.
Yes.
I played country records for 6 hours every night. I loved it. I'd order a pizza and smoke my Lucky Strikes, spin my records.
I'm with you on that. The radio stations in the 60s were a lot of fun. And the music, of course, was phenomenal. And so you were doing vinyl, you were spinning vinyl the whole time?
I was spinning vinyl, and we had the old-fashioned, they were called carts. They were big cartridges where the commercials would be recorded on those and so forth. And, even some radio programs, that syndicated radio programs, you didn't they didn't come in via computer. They came via records
Right.
that had been cut, so each week we'd get the Joe Pine show or somebody who was a conservative radio host or some other show. We put that on, play it, and that was the syndicated radio show. And then I got involved in acting, it's really what, speaking of curiosity, I think it began with curiosity. I want to try this. I had an impulse. I had an interest in it. And I sailed. I just loved it. And, I had some God-given talent. And so I followed right through at Michigan State and then went to graduate school. And I have an MFA in acting from Penn State and had some phenomenal experiences, in college theater, graduate theater, and then to New York City. And I did the, pounding the pavements thing as an actor. And I had a good career in regional theater. So I would headquarter in New York City, but I'd audition and I'd go out. I was in Alaska, Buffalo, Allentown, Pennsylvania, Utah. I did.
Wow.
So you'd live in New York, you'd audition, and then you'd go for 8 or 9 weeks. You'd be doing a play, and in regional theater, you get to do roles I certainly wouldn't have had a chance to do. Al Pacino would do Richard III. In New York. But I did a lot of Shakespeare. I did Shaw. I did Sam Shepard. I just had a lot of roles I wouldn't have had in New York. But the downside of that was that I wasn't in New York, so I didn't have the agent push behind me for commercials and film and TV. Right. It was a regional theater career, and I reached a point where, with the family and basically lack of sufficient income as an actor, I took a turn in my career. And I think again it was curiosity. One always looks back and thinks, why did I switch? Why did I change? I could have been, I should have been, whatever. We all have those things. Yeah. But I still love theater, and I still do it, and I still teach, and so forth. But the law and law school presented a whole new, really challenging intellectual challenge for me. I love big, thick books with small print. So law school was paradise. I really enjoyed it. After law school, I clerked for Justice Gibson at the Vermont Supreme Court for a year, which was, aside from being a DJ, probably the second most fun. And I mean that, it was a lot of fun. He was a wonderful, graceful, intelligent, wonderful man. And then I came to Brattleboro. I worked with Dan Davis in the state's attorney's office as a prosecutor for 5 years. And then went into general practice, and then over the last 10 years been doing basically a lot of real estate law. My friend Will Shakespeare said to me this morning, not the Will Shakespeare, but our wonderful local Will Shakespeare, we shouldn't call it retirement. We should call it development in all of the things we intended to do.
There's got to be an acronym there.
Yes, yes, exactly.
Well, it certainly isn't, a usual trajectory, although for many of us who grew up on Perry Mason, we understand the connection between acting and lawyering, which I know other people have talked about. What kind of attributes did you bring to each, or what developed for you with each?
Well, the comment often is, "Oh, you were an actor." Well, that's the same thing, as being a lawyer, which I think comes from a misconception. Also comes from TV shows where lawyers are very histrionic, and great lawyers may be very histrionic, but other great lawyers are not, because what the lawyer is doing essentially is different, clearly different, because an actor is involved in a fiction. The only real circumstance, the only real thing in theater is behavior. Everything else is fiction. The costumes, the story, everything else. Whereas in law and in the courtroom, it's really the opposite. Everything is factual. Everything is, the point is to get to as close to the real as possible in order to achieve some semblance of justice. But there are real similarities. And in law school, I did write an article in the Law Review called Acting and Legal Education, because the sensibility that an actor develops is extremely transportable into what a lawyer does. I think that empathy, the ability to listen, obviously the ability to stand and deliver, communicate, and I think awareness, curiosity, all of those things that an actor develops are really essential elements of good lawyering as well. And so I I wrote about how the actor's training, well, I think it's good for life in general, but the actor's training can be very beneficial for lawyers.
Yes.
So there are similarities. It's just that it's not quite what people think, that we're just getting up there telling tall tales, we do try to persuade on behalf of a client,
right,
but and to convince, but we're not spinning tall tales. We are supposed to tell the truth, although we can embellish it in a dramatic fashion if we wish.
No, I would think also that what you came across in terms of what kind of cases you had and or what kind of roles you had, that the productions are different, the audience is different. Were there any in particular that you really felt an affinity for?
You mean in the cases
in either acting or the type of cases that you took on?
Right. Well, that's a very interesting question. I don't think I've ever considered I've often the roles that I've had that were that still are with me as vivid remembrances. Treplev in The Seagull, Tom Wingfield and Tennessee Williams play The Glass Menagerie, Bluntschli in the wonderful Shaw play Arms and the Man. I played Horatio at the Folger Shakespeare Theater in Washington, D.C. In fact, I've been in Hamlet 4 times. I've never played Hamlet, but I've played surrounding roles. And all of those are vivid, and they become part of your whole life. They become part of your memories and who you are. But that's an interesting question. Has there been a case where, frankly, nothing immediately comes to mind? There is a real divide between the circumstances in the factual case, particularly when I was prosecuting. Those are criminal cases, so there really wasn't very much that I would be able to relate to in terms of the role. However, in civil practice, you prompt me for this, and it's kind of interesting. Real life circumstances that bring people to a situation where they have to see a lawyer do have resonances in what has been written in a play fictionally. Theater and drama, of course, in theater and drama everything is heightened to a fantastic degree. When you have a client in the office with you, certainly their stories are heightened because they're usually in an emotional state.
I also think that memory must have a lot to do with both of these, both acting and lawyering.
Oh, absolutely. The actors, and I still do teach as well, and I guess in a way, aside from acting itself, the teaching of acting to me is a real core passion. What we develop as actors is to expand as greatly as possible our sensibility, our awareness of the world around us, and to go into where what our life has brought us. I mean, finally, what we have to bring to a role is who we are. But of course, it's channeled through particular character attributes, what that character wants and needs, and so forth. But the ammunition that we have, the juice that we have, comes from ourselves, and which is, in fact, is memory and all of our experiences in life. And I think that effectiveness as a lawyer, it is one of those transportable things, because I think the best lawyers are lawyers who bring their own passions and their own experiences, to how they tell the story for a client.
Right. And empathy, as you mentioned before, I think is part of that too, certainly with taking on a
enormous part. It's obviously a huge part of what acting is all about. You observe people, you put yourself in other people's shoes all the time.
Yes.
But that likewise is important when you're talking to a client about what the client wants or needs.
Right.
You can't just impose it from your own point of view. You have to listen and try to be where that person is.
Yes, and you have the objectivity of the law also, all that fine print that you have to read.
Well, there we go. There's another interesting thing. With the law, we are sifting facts through the template of what lawyerly template applies to that particular case. In acting, we're taking all of our own palette of emotional colors and memories, and we're sifting that through the script.
Yes.
Through what the characters' wants and needs are in the relationships.
Yeah, it's a fascinating process. Both of them are fascinating processes. And you've
you've actually done quite a service. I'm understanding now, after all these years, that there's even more similarity, and perhaps I didn't move quite as far as I thought I did.
You've worked with Apron Theater locally,
Yeah,
Apron
yeah,
Theater, and you usually perform at Next Stage, I believe. Is that
that's right. Yeah,
Yeah.
we have. We spent several summers. The wonderful Carla Baldwin, who has been teaching at Putney School in the theater department, is a
Yes.
terrific director. And she's brought together some wonderful casts over the past 4 years. And there are 4 or 5 of us who are, I won't say doddering, but we're certainly a little older, but we have every intention of continuing to put together shows that we can be in.
Yeah.
But yeah, over 4 summers, we did Mother Courage, we did Tartuffe, and some other plays, and had wonderful experiences. And we did those at the Next Stage venue, which is a wonderful theater.
It's a great venue. Yeah, yeah. It's one of our treasures in the area up in Putney. For those of you who haven't taken part, they've got great programs going on this summer, and they've done all through the pandemic. Great
Oh,
programs.
absolutely. And Next Stage is, like other community venues, but it does more than just, it does concerts. They're a community gathering place. They're promoters of community, well-being in many
Yes,
ways.
yeah, community kitchen. Yes, all kinds of things they have going on there. Yeah. And Keith Marks is the new director, so he's been doing a fantastic job with a lot of new, exciting new energy. So let's talk a little bit about WVEW. This is Brattleboro Community Radio at its best. Years ago, it was Radio Free Brattleboro, and I think that we always looked at Radio Free Brattleboro as kind of a pirate station. It had something of a renegade spirit. Could you tell us a bit about that?
Well, yeah, and it's important to separate Radio Free Brattleboro from WVEW. It's a complicated history in many ways, but Radio Free Brattleboro, and I should mention Larry Block, who has passed, but he was a tremendous driving force, and his passion was bringing local radio to the people in the sense that the airwaves are the commons, the same way that water, oil, and nature is the commons, and should be available to everyone.
Yeah.
RFB had an ethos of, we have a right to broadcast. Unfortunately, there's government regulation in the Federal Communications Commission that issues licenses, and the clash is really between local radio, unlicensed radio, without really feeling the imperative to get a license, because after all, the airways belong to the people, and the FCC. So RFB, depending on which side of the window you're looking at it, RFB was, from some point of view, a pirate radio station, but from inside the studio, we were doing God's work. And we had very low, the power of RFB could barely open a garage door. I mean, but someone complained to the FCC, and over a period of time, we ended up getting seized by the U.S. Marshals. Again, it's a complicated litigation history. I did assist. We brought in an attorney who had some experience in resisting the FCC, but at the same time telling the FCC that we would be interested in having some organization get a license for us so we could continue community broadcasting. So there was a lot of there was a substantial litigation over that, and we did lose our equipment. Meantime, there was an organization not affiliated with RFB and not pirate radio in any sense. Deb Forrett and Ken Brace are 2 superheroes. They have formed an organization called Vermont Earthworks Llc. And at a meeting in Brattleboro, and in fact in some of the things we told the judge here in district court, we made clear that Vermont Earthworks would be applying for a low power FM license, which is a licensure category that the FCC allows. And Vermont Earthworks did that. They expended tremendous effort with State Act 250 permit and with applying for the permit, for the license. We got a permit and we came on the air as WVEW. And I say we, many personnel, in fact, did come over to participate at WVEW, but there wasn't a direct DNA between the two, organizations.
I see.
And in August of 2006, we took to the airwaves, and the rest is kind of history. It's been a wonderful community resource. It's all volunteer, all access. The only strictures are the FCC strictures on obscenity and so forth, but it's still free speech, all opinions and what have you. We had the Brooks House fire. We were over in the Brooks House. So we lost a year from, I believe, August of 2011 until April of 2012. We were off the air while we had to move the antenna. We moved over to the Hooker-Dunham building, where we still are. And our insurance got us new equipment. So, and now we're at the 15th anniversary of that license. And it's going to be an exciting year. I think WVEW is at 107.7 FM. And we stream WVEW.org, so we can be accessed all over the world. And we are. In fact, there are people who listen from all over the place.
Oh, that's so great. And you have some fabulous shows. You have some really interesting. Eugene Newman has a wonderful show on there. You have a show, and your show is mostly interviewing folks in the community as well.
It always was historically, but since COVID, I've basically resorted to my jukebox, my list of iTunes, and so I'm back to the 1950s and 60s.
I noticed.
Now it's all computerized, and I do kind of I almost do a kind of a top 40 DJ voice when I'm doing it. But I hit country and jazz and classical and the whole panoply. My show, if I may.
Yes, please.
Is Fridays between 4 p.m. and 5 p.m. And then it's rebroadcast on Tuesday mornings between 8 and 9 a.m. But, the whole list of programs is at WVEW.org. And as you say, there's some terrific stuff on it.
There's some terrific stuff. And we'll have that information at the end of the show, as we always do, so people can access that. And, again, you've got everybody's volunteers. So you have over 50 volunteers who are doing everything. Is that right? That including engineering and all the broadcast things that you have to do with radio?
Absolutely. Yeah. Obviously, we're not as big an operation as a commercial radio station, but there's a lot to look after, and people pitch in.
And what's your range, Jim, in terms of watt?
Well, it's the power. It basically hits the perimeter. Our antenna is at the Austin campus. We're on top of one of their buildings there. And we have tremendous range, which reaches almost to Putney. I've gone down Route 5, down Putney Road, and I've gotten almost into Putney before losing the signal. But it's, gosh, you've got me on this. I think it's 100 watts. So
I think I read 100 watts somewhere.
Yeah, and so we're more than a garage door opener now. We do reach all areas of Brattleboro and some outlying territory as well.
Yeah. Yes, but again, the people can go to your site and stream the different shows as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
That's the wonderful thing about technology and what's available to us. We have so many resources, community media in Brattleboro. We've got BCTV, which here we are. We've got WVEW. We have the Commons newspaper. We've got our Brattleboro Reformer as well. But I wonder if you could speak a little bit to the time that you've been here. You've been here almost 30 years. So you've seen a lot of changes happen. What kind of changes, what kinds of things have you seen happen in Brattleboro that you feel have been really different or really positive or that need work?
Well, it's interesting. This may really have more to do with my growing awareness of what's going on in the town as I acclimated myself over the years to Brattleboro. But aside from what is almost, I might even use the word hackneyed about people's praise of Brattleboro. And I mean that in a positive sense because it's so obvious that we're in an incredible town, and you're always saying how incredible Brattleboro is. You almost feel like you're, reciting something, but it is true. The arts, culture, I think that, and I was part of the Brattleboro Arts Initiative when we purchased the latches and I've been around to see New England Youth Theater come in,
Yep.
grow, the Brattleboro Museum, the Brattleboro Music Center. I think that aside from the ups and downs of Main Street, when I first got here, Main Street was very shuttered. There were a lot of empty storefronts, and
Really? So this was
that
90, when was this?
95, 94,
Yes,
95.
right.
There was some rough, I think some sparse,
Yeah.
but things filled up, and they by and large remained that way, even during our devastating COVID. I think that the synergy between having an economic base that's commercial as well as arts, as well as addressing low income, multi-income venues, multi-income services, and so forth.
Yes.
The town is extraordinary that way because we still have a Main Street, and we have resources that towns our size of 12, 13,000 people would dream of in some areas of the country, which attests to the energy, the drive, and the community mindedness of so many people in the town. So I think the working together of the arts with retail, service, all sorts of commercial endeavors is a unique and important part of how Brattleboro has grown.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think that there still is a lot of attention to having the downtown and the outlying areas be as diverse as possible. I think there's a lot of work to do on that.
Mm-hmm.
I think that, though I mentioned, mixed housing, low income, middle class, and what have you, there's always work to be done in that regard. But we aren't siloed, or at least we are much less siloed than most suburbs or other communities are. So that's another incredible positive for the town. And I think in general, if I may, venture into a slightly political side of it, we are a blue part of a blue state. And I think there's a lot of caring here. There's a lot of progressive thought. Again, there's a lot of push from, progressives who say we never go far enough.
Right.
But democracy is alive in Brattleboro, I think.
Right. Yes.
And will remain alive. And I think that, again, is something that I've grown more aware of.
Yes.
Been impressed by.
Yes, it's alive and well in so many different kinds of venues, and I think a lot of that popped up during the pandemic with programs like Everyone Eats, and Groundwork expanding and more services available. The homeless being able to be in the motels in town, everyone was sheltered. I think that we all feel part of it, in different ways, whether it's at the TV station or at the radio station, or working in an office downtown. It will be interesting to see what happens with downtown. Maybe there are alternatives to retail that we haven't quite discovered yet.
Yeah, and there is, the kind of a historic criticism of our Main Street being perhaps not as accessible for all incomes. And that's true. There's tourism, which exerts pressure on one side of things, and there's local populations who need services and stores that they can patronize. So that's definitely part of it.
It is, and we do have the resources of the river and the mountain and the various parks that are in town, all of the green spaces that we have.
The thing about it is you can't really live in Brattleboro without feeling ultimately that you've got to contribute in some way. It's that kind of a town.
Yes.
It's not the sort of town where you can kind of just, get into your lazy boy.
Well,
watch the Yankees, which I like to do. And by the way, that makes me a pariah on Main Street.
That's right.
Because I'm northern New Jersey. I grew up with Yogi Berra and Mickey Mantle. I remember when Roger Maris hit his 61st home run. But Carly Yastrzemski fans will not appreciate that.
Well, we make room for everyone here in Brattleboro to the best of our ability.
Good.
Jim, thank you so much.
Yeah.
It's great. It's wonderful to have those the snapshots of the radio station and your acting career and lawyering and all of it. And also your point of view on Brattleboro, which we always welcome. We're always glad to hear about.
Thank you, Wendy. It's been a real pleasure.
And thanks to all of you for joining us again today. We are a show that just keeps on going. We keep bringing folks in from the area and talking to different people. We will never run out of people to have on this show. So be in touch, stay tuned, and we'll see you next time.